So then we move into the one-on-one date. Rodney gets the one-on-one, and they start off. They're playing Truth or Dare, and I really had a lot of fun watching this date. Like, it was just super cute. I felt like the challenges were actually like very engaging. They seemed to be having fun. Like, it was just a good time. I feel like it was one of those things where it's a good way to mix in trying new things, like having new experiences together, while also having the opportunity to really get to know one another on a genuine level. Like, I feel like sometimes the dates that involve like new experiences for the both of them don't really leave a lot of room for connection and conversation. Like, for example, The Bachelor loves to do a helicopter date. And I think for a lot of people, like, that's something new. That's something you don't do in your everyday life. But when you're up there in a helicopter, you have those like soundproof headphones or whatever. Like, you can't really talk and like connect. All you can really do is point out the window and be like, look, we're flying over this area. Like, there's not really a lot of like connection happening. So I like that this date mixed both of those aspects. So then we get to the dare portion of the date. And they're chilling on the bed, kind of opening up to each other. And Rodney tells Michelle that his biggest fear is that he's going to die before he becomes a husband and a father. They don't really do much with that, like, statement. They just kind of say, okay, like, that makes sense. And then Michelle proceeds to open up to him, and she tells him that her biggest fear is being complacent, and that she doesn't necessarily... She has such a strong drive that she's always working towards the next thing. And while that is ultimately a positive quality, sometimes it backfires on her because she doesn't always take the time to appreciate where she currently is in the present moment. And sometimes I feel like what she was saying is like she's always looking towards that next thing. And sometimes she's in that next thing. Like, she gets what she has been working for, but she doesn't even have time to appreciate it because she's already on to the next thing. And the way this conversation went, I don't know if it's just me being nitpicky, but I personally wasn't completely satisfied with Rodney's response here. Because Rodney, and here's my thing, I know he was being nice. I know he didn't have any negative intentions, or it wasn't framed this way in his mind, but this is just how I perceived it and how it came across to me as a viewer. So Rodney, in response to Michelle telling him all this about her fear of complacency, he says, oh, well, I just want you to know, like, nothing about you is complacent. And on the surface, like, yeah, that's a nice thing to say, but to me, you're kind of invalidating what that person is trying to open up to you about, right? Like, if I'm telling you, hey, this is my biggest fear, and then you're saying, oh, don't worry, like, that's not even true about you, you're not giving me that room to explore that fear, because it is valid. Even if you don't see it, that doesn't mean I don't feel it and I don't experience it. And I'm trying to share this vulnerable moment with you, and for you to just be like, oh, like, don't worry about it. It doesn't make me feel as though I can continue to speak on it because you don't see it as something valid. And secondly, and this really bothers me, honestly. I get really, not annoyed, but it doesn't come across as genuine to me. And again, I think Rodney's a genuine person. Like, I'm not saying this is a reflection on his whole character, but just in this one moment, it's never genuine to me when someone gives me a compliment that I don't feel that they have enough evidence to speak on yet, even if I agree with it or even if I know that it's true. Like, for example, if I'm meeting a guy for the first time and he's like, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. Thank you. You have evidence. And this is not me being cocky, but like, if you think I'm beautiful, you can think that because you can see that. Like, I'm here, you can take in what I look like and in a split second decide that that is true for you to say. But if I meet a guy and he's like, oh my gosh, you're so intelligent. Like, you're so smart. Like, within the first date or the first few minutes of meeting me, it's like, it's weird because it's like, I know I am. I agree with that statement about myself, but you don't know me enough to say that. There's no evidence. There's nothing that I've done to prove to you that I am intelligent. Like, you're just saying that to say it. You know what I mean? And so I feel like Rodney saying that is just like, okay, but maybe this is true about Michelle. Maybe she is complacent. Like, we don't know. You don't know her. You might And I think that also might be something to do with, like, this is a TV show and, like, we've met Michelle before this, so maybe he watched her and felt like he had sort of a parasocial relationship with her and, like, knew her before coming onto the show. But I need him to get out of his head and realize, hey, like, let me just get to know this girl without any preconceptions or preconceived notions and just see what she's about, see what she's up to. So that just slightly bothered me. But again, I don't think Rodney is disingenuous. I really like him. So they move on. I have to say, I don't know if it was just me. I was really startled that the date continued because I felt like it was a wrap. I felt like we got in the bed, we're relaxing. Like, if I get in my bed, I'm not getting back up. But they did. They get into the water, into the boat, and travel to an unknown table in the middle of who knows where. And they continue their date. This felt like a marathon, y'all, but the second half of it was still good, so it was fine. And they continue to open up to each other, right? Like, Rodney's talking about his struggles, having a single mom, and how his mom kind of really inspires him and is a big influence in his life. So that was a pleasant conversation. And then Michelle, she proceeds to open up about a previous relationship that she had with what's assumed to be a white man, but it could have really just been any non-black person. But she had a previous ex who, Michelle had an experience in which she was at a store and she got called the N-word. And obviously that made her upset. She went back home to confide in her partner about this experience. And the partner kind of doesn't really understand the gravity or the impact, why it's impacting her the way that it was. And he kind of says, well, by you reacting this strongly, you're giving that power to the woman. And this word shouldn't even, like, you shouldn't let this word affect you that much. And Michelle says that in reflecting on this experience, she realized that in that moment she was justifying her feelings, and she shouldn't ever in a relationship, number one, have to feel like she needs to justify her feelings. And number two, ultimately, she didn't say this explicitly, but I think she was alluding to that she, in her next relationship, doesn't want to end up with someone who will not understand her experiences. And that's not saying that she has to end up with a black person, but if she does end up with someone non-black, I think that she wants them to be able to take that time to really understand where she's coming from when she inevitably has another experience like this. And, whew, y'all, this was so real. This is such a real thing, and this is why I'm loving every single minute of this season, because I feel like every other scene, there's just something happening that is so relatable. And on top of that, this is another moment in which I feel like the impact and the potential of reality TV is so important and so far beyond just a stereotype of, like, oh, trashy dating, like, whatever, because The Bachelor is the biggest reality TV franchise in the country. Prime time television slot, like, so many people watch this show, and so many of them are white. Like, that's just what it is. I think that it is amazing that we have this black person who has been given this platform to speak on these issues in a way, number one, that will reach this audience, first of all, because I don't know how many people in Bachelor Nation would take the time to seek out this type of listening experience on their own, right? And number two, it's being presented in a way that's accessible, that's digestible. It's not being shoved in your face. Like, we're not getting a history lesson or anything. Like, it's just, hey, I, as Michelle, am speaking on my experience that also happens to be a very common experience that other black people can accept. And I feel like since Michelle is so accepted and loved by Bachelor Nation, it's going to make that much more of an impact, because you're hearing this experience from someone that you really admire and that you really enjoy as a leader, and you're like, oh wow, like, it just sinks in more when it's coming from someone that you respect. I love that The Bachelor has this platform to reach people that may not have these types of experiences and can learn from this. But on the flip side of that, like I was saying, I love that The Bachelor is also providing this representation and giving a voice to people who can relate and have experienced things like this in their own life. Like for me, for example, I remember when I was in high school, I was friends with this white guy, and we were like really cool, like we're really good friends. But one time we were like walking to class, and he was telling me some story about some other black guy that he was friends with, who I don't really remember the full details, but I think this other black friend that he had been called the N-word. And I was like, oh man, like that's really upsetting, like that's really messed up. And this white guy that I was friends with, he was like, I mean, what does it matter? Like that word doesn't really like bother anyone anymore. And to me, at the time, I didn't respond back. I didn't say anything to the contrary. I wasn't like, well, what do you know? Like, da-da-da-da. I was just like, oh, maybe I'm making too big of a deal about this. Like, you know, maybe that's in the past. We have Obama as a president, you know, like maybe I'm just like overanalyzing the situation. But looking back, it's like, well, who are you to decide that? You don't receive the impacts of that word. You know what I mean? Like, you're not the one who has to deal with how that word feels being used towards you. So who are you to decide whether it's still a big deal or not? And I feel like so many people have similar stories to that, especially if you've grown up in a white environment like Michelle has, like I have. So I'm ready for all the experiences that we're going to get, all the future like vulnerable moments that Michelle is about to hit us with this episode. I'm ready.